your listeners, and I hope we have a bit of fun today.
Absolutely. Coach, when I first mentioned this to the viewers about it being a basketball discussion and helping educate people about the game of basketball, so many people were excited. And it goes to what you and I have discussed so much off the record over the years about how we wish there was a better way to help people learn more about the game. So I'm very thankful for you for doing this. And I'm sure many of the listeners are thank you as well. First off, how's your workout? How many miles can you still run at this age? Can you still do 10 miles a day?
No, mate, I don't run. I just try to walk at a good, healthy pace, and I lift weights. So it was really good. I got about 6 kilometers in, and it's a nice hot day, so I got a good sweat up. So I'm still out of the shower, but still sweating a little bit. So nothing but some good, healthy stuff.
Fantastic, fantastic. Last season, I remember one of the challenges you had was dealing with, I believe, something on your chest, an infection of sorts, if I'm not mistaken. Just wanted to make sure all good now, all healthy to go with the UAP season coming up.
100%, 100%. Fighting fit and ornery as ever.
Fantastic. I'm so happy to hear that. Okay, coach, let's get started with the basketball talk. Now, when I think about basketball, and obviously I haven't been watching or in basketball as long as many people have, including you, but when I think back to the early days when I started watching basketball, immediately spacing comes to mind, right? The floor is much more spread out now. It feels like penetrators and your guards and your wingmen have more room to operate, especially in a league in the NBA where it's more one-on-one defense, and it might be, some people might say, softer, right? But at the same time, I compare it to like the 90s or the early 2000s, where a lot of actions were in the post. You would have 6 to 7 guys in the paint with maybe one or two guys spreading the floor. And now you look at basketball. I think about the Boston Celtics in the NBA. They just won the championship. And one of the reasons why their offense was so dynamic was because they could play five guys at all time and have them all in the perimeter. And I believe it was Joe Lacob or Bob Myers, the general manager of the Golden State Warriors, who said in a conference lately that one of the ways to win basketball at the highest level now is you need to have multi-dimensional players, guys who can dribble, shoot, pass, and make all these decisions in a quick manner. So it's much more quicker, the pace is faster, the floor is spread out, and it feels like you have less room for error in basketball now compared to before. As someone who is a lifer of the game, who has seen many eras of basketball, who has seen many different styles that it has been played in, what to you, if you had to describe it briefly, are the key differences in the way basketball is played now compared to even like 15 years ago?
Well, Naveen, I think it's a great point, and it is an important talking point for people that really love the game from an analytical standpoint and an in-depth standpoint. The rules makers decide how the game is going to be played. The rules makers decide where players should spend their time working on whatever skills are going to be most useful in the modern game, whenever modern era you're talking about. So, starting with the NBA, they've taken a lot of the physicality out of the game with the way they call fouls and the use of hands and the space they're allowing players between offensive and defensive players. A lot of people like that because it inflates the score, it increases the speed, it creates a lot more highlights because of one-on-one play. And a lot of people don't like it because they miss the physicality, they miss the obvious competitive nature of a contact sport. And you have to decide for yourself which camp you're in because you really can't have both. So you've seen, as you said, the demise of the interior game, the demise of the post game, other than the rim attacks. And the reason that nowadays the rim attacks, you see them a bit more, is because the rules makers, I believe intentionally, by extending the 3 point line and, over the years as they've done that, I think they have sent a message to coaches and to trainers and to players, of course, is you better be a shooter. And of course, the more players that are required to have shooting ability, the more other perimeter skills come with that. Because it's no good just to be a guy that stands on the perimeter and shoots the ball. So that's why you get to your point of multidimensional players. You rarely ever in the past eras thought of a one-dimensional player as a perimeter player. Even a pass first point guard generally had to be able to shoot the ball a bit. He had to be a pretty good defender, maybe a court general, a good leader, but probably didn't need interior skills. But a lot of interior players only needed to be a good post presence, period, offense and defense. They were never asked to step out. Nowadays, it's common. And with the need to be able to step out to the perimeter comes the evolution, I guess, of the many faceted, multi-dimensional players. Now you see, as you cited with the Celtics, and you see it in EuroLeague now with stretch fives all over the place. Um, you'd better be a guy that can play around the rim and play on the perimeter. But again, I get back. I'd say the rules makers are the guys that wanted it this way, and I believe they wanted it for marketing purposes. I think they wanted the game to be more highlights driven than for the purist who loves to delve into the analysis of coaches, the analysis of the action, the analysis of statistics. I don't think the marketers are interested in that type of fan.
Now, speaking of analysis and statistics, arguably my favorite story that I wrote last UAP season was how I kind of not exactly went deep because I know there are areas you guys don't reveal, but I wrote an article about how Ateneo uses advanced analytics to help analyze their game. And one of the reasons why that was my favorite article is because you gave us a golden quote in the press room was when you pulled out the stat sheet and you were like, I don't give a rat's ass about what's here, which was a golden quote, by the way. I just have to say, but it was true because when I researched a little more, you actually have heart stats and I believe head stats or hustle stats, something like that, right? So now with all the data available when it comes to growing the game and preparing for opponents and preparing your team, is analytics more of a before the season starts, this is our philosophy? Or is it more of a game by game approach where we're going to see who our opponents are and we're going to try to depend the analytics we use according to how we beat the certain team?
Combination of both, I'd say, but principally you use your data analytics to reaffirm your philosophical approach as a coach. So, as a coach, you say, we believe in on ball defense as the most important facet of our defense, or we believe in rebounding, or a combination of several factors. And all of those, in conjunction with one another, are what you as a coach believe leads to a winning formula done well. And that then becomes the foundation for your coaching philosophy, how you approach the game from an objective standpoint. So you're right. The traditional stat sheet doesn't have a lot to do in terms of predicting or even evaluating why a team wins or loses. It's more about how players perform in those conventional statistic categories. Um, but even in combination with one another, you don't really find the winning formula. And there are many, many different types of analytical formulas that different coaches use. We made our own. Of course, we
Mm-mm.
stole from other coaches a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but when we put it all together, it is ours. But we don't just analyze our team, and we don't just analyze our individuals. We also analyze uh, team results in specific categories, um, and we analyze our opponents as well. So we try to get a picture of what we think will be required of us in a particular game and what areas we think we'll need to perform well in. But also, what underpins that is that the players should always be aware of what's expected of them. individually in relation to our heart stats, as you said.
Got you, got you. Thank you for that information, Coach. Now we have a question here from Nicole, my sister, who is also who is in basketball media as well. And I find this interesting. She asks, "Hey, Coach Tab, do you prefer creating a system that adjusts to your team's skill sets, or do you prefer that your players adjust to a system? Is it sometimes simple like that, Coach, or do you have to work in what some might call the gray area in between those two?"
I think everybody works in the gray area. You want to be a purist to your philosophy, but sometimes you're recruiting and you know circumstances don't help you do that. So I would say to Nicole, and hello Nicole, I would say that you try to recruit to a philosophy that you have, a playing philosophy, but at the end of the day, you don't always achieve that with all the players that you are able to attract to your program. So there is always a degree of we have to adapt how we're going to play to the particular talent that we have, and um, not to uh, try to make an issue out of anything, but we had Mason Amos in our program, and Mason left and went to LaSalle. Mason is an outstanding offensive basketball player. He's a great shooter. He does a good job around the rim scoring. He's a guy that you can really channel the ball through because he's a good decision maker. He's a smart player. But he really, because he probably doesn't have his body everywhere exactly the way that he wants his body yet, he could be a liability at times at the defensive end. So, you know, because you had a player that, you really needed him on the court because of his propensity to be productive at the offensive end, you had to modify your defensive principles in order to accommodate him out there at the defensive end.
Right.
When Mason left our program to go to LaSalle, it just so happens that in our roster we replace him with guys like Josh Lazaro and Andrew Bongo, who are smaller but much more mobile and defensive oriented. So now all of a sudden our defense has an entirely different character to it because we're capable of doing things defensively now that when we had Mason, we probably had to be more cautious about using certain defensive tactics and techniques. That's an example how, what you have within your program kind of forces you as a coach to modify what your philosophy might be. And because of an injury, because of circumstances, it can change in the turn of a dime, and
Exactly.
you have to be able to adjust.
Coach, so much of basketball actions now is ball screen, right? And first we saw it in EuroLeague. That's how they beat the Americans in the Olympics 20 years ago, Manu Ginobili, Argentina. And you saw the NBA start adjusting to it. And slowly by slowly, you're seeing it in the Philippines as well, with coaches like yourself, Coach Topex, Coach Alden, and innovative guys using it. Now, of course, with so much ball screen action in basketball, you need to come up with different defense strategies to counter that. So you have drop, you could hedge and recover, have the big man hedge and recover. You could switch, you could trap, but of course that leaves you vulnerable because now suddenly there's a chance you're playing 4-on-3 on defense, right? You mentioned Mason, and Mason may be having not that much mobility moving in ball screen action. So would you say when you're trying to play someone like Mason who might be slower in his position, you have to rely more on drop defense so he's not moving so much compared to like if you're playing Lazaro or Bongo, suddenly you can switch more or you can trap more. Are those some of the decisions you have to make on the spot depending on your lineup?
Yeah, you don't usually make them on the spot. You might make an adjustment, but you usually pre-prepare. Uh, and it isn't just what your players are capable of doing, so or incapable of doing. You also have to take into account the opposition. Where are their strengths in using ball screens? Are they guard oriented? Are they roller oriented? Are they more inclined to try to attract rotations and then kick out to shooters? So all of those will also impact which type of defense that you're going to use in contesting the ball screen. And you named a few, but the overall trend, like there's about 9 different known ball
Wow.
screen defenses. But the overall trend now in the world of basketball is to try to, let me just take a step back before I go here. A ball screen is, the concept of a ball screen is very simple. All you're trying to do is create a 2-on-1 somewhere on the court. So
Mm.
you're trying to eliminate a defender by screening him momentarily, right? And in that moment, you want to see, does the defense rotate, react, somehow try to compensate for who would be open, whether it's the guard with the ball or whether it's the roller. Of course, if you compensate and cover the roller, then you maybe leave a shooter open. Can the offensive team make that pass? Can they get that open player into the right spot? Is he a capable shooter? So all of these things, kind of go into the decision model for a ball screen defense. And as I was starting to say, the current trend now is, how do you defend without committing a third defender
Mm.
to the ball screen? And this is the big challenge. And you can watch UP, they do it remarkably well with extremely aggressive guard play on the ball. So they're always trying to fight over, and the term we use is beat the screen.
Mm.
And if they beat the screen, then obviously rotations aren't required.
So they can get skinny because they can go over the screen instead of under. Yeah.
100%. And in the UAAP, with the level of physicality that we have, a lot of times you don't have to be getting skinny. You just have to be stronger and just push your way over and literally make room for yourself. And that's something that always challenges the referee. Well, the other type of defense that I'm talking about now that is almost being used at the highest level, I don't want to say universally, but well, across the board, you see it more and more and more, is switching.
Mm.
And
Exactly. And the
and
Celtics did that a lot too.
100%. So did the US in the Olympics. And a lot of this goes to what you were talking about when you were talking about multifaceted players. So now one of the things we see disappearing from the game is the big, strong interior player who also was probably not a switch defender.
Like a Zach
Now you see,
Randolph type.
correct, or going back like a Patrick Ewing or
Mm.
Robert
David Robinson.
Parrish, yeah, Shaquille O'Neal. Those guys didn't want to switch on to guards, right? But in Anthony Davis, he can switch on to guards. Joel Embiid, maybe not so much. So we're still in this transition period where we're seeing the bigs become smaller and the smalls become bigger, and the mobility being something that is across the board. Why is Justin Brownlee an effective import for our naturalized player for Gilas when traditionally all we ever thought about was getting a big man? Well, two reasons. One, we have Kai Soto, who really helps to fill in that big man slot and give us the credentials that a big man gives us, but also because Justin is not just a good perimeter player and a good interior scorer, he's an outstanding all court defender.
And passer too. He can find the
Yeah,
open man quickly. Yeah.
he's just a really versatile player, and he's a willing hard worker at both ends of the floor. That kind of player is special. We used to think that they were rare to find, but now today's game, more and more players are being taught to be like this, and more of them are accepting the challenge of being like this.
Fantastic. Now you mentioned aspects about the ball screen's goal is to get to get an advantage, right? Whether that's numbers wise, but sometimes it can also be finding the right matchup. We see a lot of inverted pick and rolls. Nikola Jokic and the Denver Nuggets love to do this so he could get a smaller guy on him. So we have a question here from Nico that I want to ask you because I think it's interesting. He says, how do you teach screening, and what are your thoughts on the inverted pick and rolls that For example, the OKC Thunder used a lot last NBA season. Do you like inverted pick and rolls?
Well, whether I like them or not is irrelevant. Do you have the personnel to execute? And
Correct.
below the professional level, you probably don't find a lot of big men with the requisite passing skills. A big man can put the ball on the floor. A big man can maybe even shoot if his guy goes under or something like that. But to be able to be cast in the role of a decision maker off of a ball screen is something entirely different. And you've got to have special players, big men that are playmakers, that are great decision makers, have great vision, as well as the great skill set to do that.
Is that why
Um,
Kevin Kimbao is like a cheat code for DLSU to some degree? I mean, he's not a big man, but he's got a big body, right?
it depends on who's guarding him. Like
Mm,
that determines whether an offensive player is a big man or not. If you
mm-mm,
put a small guy on Kevin, then you're not able to exploit a ball screen,
mm.
size advantage or an inverted screen situation. They'll just switch it, put another small man on, if that's the philosophy. However, if he's defended by a big man, Kevin would be an ideal candidate for that. But you would probably still find that the defense would switch and try and attack him with speed and worry about the rolling big man with a triple switch action where the small guy that switched onto the big man would switch again with another
Mm,
player who has less of a size disadvantage. That's just called a triple switch.
mm-mm.
And in that sense, you try to negate the strength that LaSalle would be trying to gain with a ball screen for Kevin. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's very tactical. Um, you spend a lot of time as a coach worrying about these exact things and trying to get it right, and trying to figure out what your counters will be to your opposition's tendencies that you see week after week.
Absolutely. And we can talk about this so much. I feel like we can go on for 5, 6 hours, especially with everyone here. But let's add some visual aspect to it. I'm going to pull up a couple of plays and I'd love to get your thoughts. This one, I have to start with this because this to me was a great play. You remember this, right?
I haven't
Yeah,
seen it
I.
yet.
You haven't seen this one yet? You were here, right? I mean, come on, you
Oh,
gotta
is this the
remember
Jones
this.
Cup? This
Yeah,
is
the
the Jones.
Jones Cup. So I
Right.
watched this a few times, and the first thing I noticed is this guy here, if you guys see my mouse, who's supposed to be guarding this action here, kind of falls asleep for a second. You see, right now, there are two guys here, like you said, and Matt is free, even for just half a second, to go to the other side, use that pin down from Isaac, and really, that's the breathing room he needs to get a shot up quickly. And suddenly, you're up by one and you win the game. Could you tell us about drawing up this play? Was this exactly the idea you had in mind?
Yeah, 100%. That is the option that we were looking for. We figured in this scenario, uh, this was a very, very good team we were playing. That's the national team of Taiwan, and we found ourselves right in the thick of a decision in this game. So we felt we would go for the win on this last shot, um, and rather than go for the tie, of course, we still had to run out the clock, for another half a second or whatever it was, but we weren't going to play for the tie here. So really, the play is it's predicated on what you believe defenses are going to do. So I don't know if you can back it up or restart it,
Okay, you can
but
just tell me if you want me to pause any part or
okay,
go back to any
leave it.
part.
Okay,
Right
here
now.
we are
Yeah.
at the start.
Yeah.
So what we do is we put a really good shooter in Jolo Mendoza on the weak side block, and
Mm,
he's going to come off of Matt Nieto's uh, cross screen, really. And because it's a one man and a two man, you assume there's going to be a switch there.
mm,
But you also hope that there may be some confusion in that moment,
mm,
a big moment. And with Jolo being the primary shooter, you think that defenses are going to focus more on him than on the point guard, Matt Nieto, who is a very competent shooter, but wasn't probably the target in this situation. Second thing, we're trying leave it there for a second. We're trying to get 30 who's taking the ball in to get the defender on the ball to cover Jolo, to move down with a ball fake down. And I don't think 30 did a great job of that. He's locking in on Matt at this moment,
Mm-mm.
who is the primary target. So the other action is a back screen at the top where we're back screening Isaac Go. And again, all we're trying to do is create some confusion in the defense and get them to react to the screen. But all we're really doing is setting up Isaac's man to defend him and not defend the pin down for Matt, because we don't want Isaac's man reading that screen and switching on to Matt. We want him worried about Isaac as the primary scoring option on a back screen.
Mm-mm.
So, we got some of what we were looking for here. 30 threw a perfect pass. Matt got, as you said, Matt got enough of a gap on his defender that Isaac could get into the gap and set that screen. Isaac's man never really read the play and switched. So Matt got a pretty clean look. And, a lot of coaches have lived and died not on the quality of their coaching, but on the player's ability to make a shot. And so when Matt makes the shot, it makes everybody look good. If he misses the shot, nobody really cares.
So my first question in a play like that is that something that you're practicing multiple times in practice for a situation like this? Or is this something more of, okay, it's a gut feel instinct? We feel that we can confuse them, like you said, with the cross screen between Mendoza and Matt, and 30 with the fake pass, and Isaac with a bit of the back screen there. Or is that something you've worked to perfection? That's why you're confident it's going to work the way it did.
Um, we have a bunch of plays that we will go to in late game situations, and we've probably run most of them in practice a couple of times. But the problem with running these plays in practice is you can't ever run them live because
Mm.
the defense knows what's coming because you
Mm-hmm.
coach them as well, and they're going to cheat and take everything away. So you run some of them what we call dummy, with no defense. But the 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 ultimate execution of the play really depends on the discipline of your team and uh, how composed they are in the moment to do a specific job rather than to go out and try and win a game. And these guys, all of them did a great job if you watch this play, and we got a good result.
Absolutely. In a moment like that, though, where you're determining, okay, which guy am I going to give the ball to go for the win? How do you come to a decision where it's Matt Nieto? Is it because he's the veteran, he's the captain, or is it something a little more mental where you think he might be the most calm and composed type of player, and in a situation like this, that's who we have to go to? Or is it something like he's hot, he's had a hot hand? How do you decide that? How do you determine that?
Well, for me, the biggest component is character.
Mm.
You got to have the man that feels he can make a shot in a big moment, and the moment isn't bigger than the man. That's number one. Number two, sometimes you have to factor in the quality of your opposition, and that means, uh, and this is a national team, of course, so they're very high quality. So we were scouted for this game, so they would have known who our primary shooters were, and that would be Jolo. With that lineup, it would be Jolo and Isaac Go. And so, uh, you have to weigh up. Do you want to try and go to your best shooter, or do you want to use your best shooter, your best scorer as a decoy, and perhaps get some defensive focus on them and pop somebody else out who maybe you can get a more open shot for, and you have enough confidence in them that you put the game in their hands in that moment. But I think one of the most important things is that you have to have a culture where your overriding philosophy within your team is that we're not going to win or lose this game based on one shot. We're going to win or lose this game based on a culmination of moments. And if it comes down to the last moment, that's everybody's fault, including the coach. and we never put the pressure on one person to bail everybody out for the mistakes that we all made. So we have to be prepared to celebrate that moment in victory or in defeat with the courage that we empower a certain player with. And once you do that, then you live with the result, whatever it is. You never ever finger point in that situation, and you just go on. And if you make the shot, everybody is heroes, and if you miss the shot, you're just as heroic in terms of maybe your execution, but nobody cares about that. So you have to live with that result.
Was that why after Matt made a shot, you still stayed stoic, no reaction, arms still folded there? I mean, you probably had an idea there was a good chance you're going to win the game, but were you also thinking, okay, on defense, what do we have to do now?
Of course, game's not over, and again, I don't, you know, was I part of that play? A small part, you know, but I, the players should be celebrating. Matt should be celebrating. It was their moment. I'm happy for them. I'm happy to be close to them and get some rub off of the joy they have in that moment. But I've had so many joys and disappointments in my life that um, I'm not going to get carried away. In one moment, particularly when there's a little bit more time. And the job has to be finished.
Fantastic, fantastic thoughts as always. Okay, let's get to another play here. This one is recently actually from last UAAP season. And this was a game you guys didn't win, but almost did by sending it to overtime. So this is with FEU up three, fourth quarter, 26.5 seconds left. And, first of all, in a situation like this, do you decide beforehand, okay, we're gonna go for the two, cut the lead to one, then foul them and send them to the free throw line, or do you decide, okay, we're gonna go for the three to tie the game? How do you determine that in a timeout situation?
Well, yeah, you usually do determine that, and there's a multiplicity of factors. Are you on a run? Um, are you in a lull? Um, who do you have available to take shots? How are they defending in that particular moment? And I could probably go on. There's usually a lot of factors going through your mind, and that's why you want to have great assistant coaches who are composed and doing their job and taking into consideration all the factors that you need to think about before you decide which type of play you're going to run.
Fantastic. Okay, let's get to display now. So I thought this play was meant for Chris, and I think it might have been, but it ends up with Mason. So Jared takes it out of bounds. Jared is your probably best option as a shooter in the guard position. And of course, they always say, right, sometimes the guy inbounding the ball is the most dangerous guy on the court in a situation like this. So he's inbounding the ball. Kai comes off staggered screens. He gets the ball, gets it back to Jared. And now I want everybody to watch Chris here because Kai gives a screen. Jared gets two on the ball. And right there, I feel like Kai has an opening to get here to the corner and get open. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, but that wasn't the play, so he's
Oh, okay.
executing. Sometimes, players, particularly as you move up in levels, you want players to read scenarios, and if they do read the scenario, then he may see that he's open and be able to take that shot.
Exactly. So the play here materializes, and this is an elevator play. Chris is gonna come out, elevator, get the ball, and now it's a two-man action between him and Mason. He drives first to his strong side, and you can see the defender Sleet here try to recover in time and block off his strong side, but Chris gets to his strong side. And here's the miscommunication. It feels like Sleet is pointing to Mason to tell his guy right here, okay, Mason's open, go to him, it's a switch. But the guy right here guarding Mason in the ball screen realizes if he doesn't stay here, Chris has an open lane to the rim. But in this situation, a three ties the game, a two cuts the lead to one, right? So you have to make a split decision, in my opinion, in that moment. He goes there, cuts the driving lane, Sleet recovers, but now Mason is momentarily open. And Kai could even come here and provide the pin down just in case someone tries to get in the way and Mason has a better looking shot. Kai doesn't do that, but he decides to cut instead. Mason gets the ball. and the guy actually does a good job closing out while preventing the attack, the penetration from Mason. Mason lets it fly. That's a good enough look for him, and he ties the game. So tell us the context behind this play, coach, and let me know if you want me to freeze anywhere. I'll backtrack here. No, wait, let's go. Okay, here we are. Go for it. I think you're muted, coach. Hello. No problem. Take your time. Hello. Oh, I still can't hear you. Okay, let's try that again. Let's try that again. Can you try, coach? I think you're muted, coach. Or can everyone hear Coach Tab's audio? Nah. Coach isn't muted actually, but I think the internet might be. Wait a minute. Still not working, coach. Okay. I'm gonna invite you back on the stage again, coach. I think there might be a technical error. I'm gonna invite you back on the stage. 1 second. Hello? Ooh, still not working. I wonder why. Um, no, coach. Something about your mic. Maybe try to change your microphone into your there. Click the audio icon, the arrow, and then maybe you'll have to change your microphone so something else will work. Still not working. You can also chat what you're saying, coach. But I think if you can click the arrow next to the microphone, there are options there to change the microphone you're using. Maybe your microphone's not working right now. Okay, let me take you out first, and then we'll bring you back on the stage. Okay, everybody, we're just working on some technical difficulties here. We're gonna get Coach Tab back on once the audio is working again. Thanks to everyone, by the way, for tuning in. This has been such a fun conversation so far. This has been so great. There we go.
Naveen, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now, Coach. Thank you. That's awesome. That works now.
Okay, I think perhaps my battery was running down and I plugged it in, and that might have
I
caused.
see. I see. No problem. No problem, Coach.
Now I've
Okay.
lost all video with you.
Oh, do you not see anything right now?
No, I just got a black screen. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear. Okay, everybody, we're gonna invite Coach Tab back on and see if this works. Sorry for the technical difficulties, everybody. Hey, Coach, you there?
Hi guys.
Can you see me, Coach?
Yeah, I can see you. And apologies, I these things ran out of power, and my phone was running out of power too. So
Technology, can't live with it, can't live without it, huh?
and, and at my age, I don't want to live with it, but I have to.
All right. Well, we're happy that coach is here, of course. Okay, let's get to the highlight again. Can you see it right now, coach?
Not yet. Now I got that black screen again.
Oh, black screen. Interesting. I
It
wonder
worked
why.
before.
Yeah, I
Let's.
wonder why it's not working. All right, let's but anyway, let's talk about that play, coach.
Yep.
Now that I'll try to get that back on. But that play, was that initially designed for Chris?
Yeah, that's an elevator play, but it has secondary actions.
Mm,
So probably the only thing that what you didn't see, and what probably wasn't executed 100% correctly is when Chris comes through the elevator, he was open enough to catch the ball, but he didn't have a real good shot. And we weren't time pressured on that shot. So the secondary action to that is a horns ball screen action. And that's why we had both Mason and Kai Balungai in the ball screen, because both of them are very good pick and pop shooters. So when Chris used Mason, you saw Mason pop and what we call drag behind Chris a little bit. Okay, now I can see it again.
okay, let me play it. Let me know where you want me to freeze it.
Okay, so you see a ball screen there, and then Kai rolls into stop there. It rolls into what's called an elevator, and Chris
Okay.
between Kai and Mason,
Yeah.
and they try to screen his man. But Chris probably could have had a shot right there, but he tended to flare a little bit, which he didn't need to do. And because he flared, his man didn't go through the elevator or didn't get caught by the elevator. He came outside the elevator.
Mm,
So now we've got, because Chris didn't get a clean look, we've got a ball screen action now with Mason and Kai both as screening options.
right.
Chris starts to use Mason, but then he rejects the screen and attacks the rim, which is the same as using a screen. Now, the only thing from here that you don't see is we really wanted to shoot the three. We would have taken a wide open two. So if Mason's man didn't cut Chris off, he would have gone all the way and shot the two. But what we should see here is what you kind of alluded to is Kai should be pinning down right now on probably not even Mason's man, probably his own man. So he couldn't switch out and cover Mason on this shot. But Kai, instead of standing and watching, he should have screened either Mason's man or his own man. And this is what happens in these big moments. You know, players tend to, you know, what we say ball watch or spectate rather than, fully execute everything that makes the play work.
So this comes down to Mason. What do you think of the defense on Mason's shot? Like, if you were coaching the defense right now, would you live with that kind of defense on the shot attempt? Because he's like a step away from Mason, and knowing that a three hurts you more than a two in the situation, maybe ideally you want the guy a little more closer up to Mason in the shot here. But given how the play played out, are you okay if you're the defense in the situation?
Well, ironically, because Chris did not use Mason, which would have been a switch, I'm sure, because he rejected the screen and attacked, that caught Mason's defender probably unaware.
Mm,
Instinctively, he moved to cut Chris off. But, you know, the strict answer to your question is Coach Olson over on the sideline probably would have been screaming at him, you know, don't worry about the ball. Don't worry about the drive. Stick with your man.
right.
You know, it's just one of those situations where a player makes a momentary decision and it has very dire consequences for the team.
Absolutely. Now, in a timeout, you have about 30 seconds to give all these reminders to your players, right? A three hurts you more than a two. Don't do this. Don't do that. How do you filter what to remind them in such a short span of time? Or do you just kind of trust based on practices and film viewing sessions that they should know what to do?
That's a great question, and I could give you the answer that would make me and all coaches look good, and that is, oh yes, we cover all the key points, and we hammer things like keep a hand up on all the shooters and switch all screens, and the truth is you do trust your players. You cover as many things as you can, but you end up trusting your players, and you hope that you've practiced enough. You hope you have the right players on the court. But you know, we're not geniuses. Our players aren't geniuses, and uh, people would remember back to last season when we played Adamson, and I think it was Magbuhos who hit a three
Hmm.
that cost us the game, and we made defensive mistakes on that play. So the same type of scenario, but we're on the other side of the coin in that case. And um, same thing I said earlier. I've been around long enough where I've felt like a complete idiot at the end of a game because of something I didn't say or some tactic I didn't remind the team of. And I've, smirked behind my hand knowing that I didn't do a good coaching job in a moment and still escaped looking like I was, the coaching marvel. When you're around long enough, you go through all of it.
How does a perfectionist like yourself just, and this is more of the human side of it, but how does a perfectionist such as yourself just come to terms with there are just aspects of the game I cannot control no matter what?
Naveen, you say perfectionist, and I guess that's flattering. Um, I think it's also, a little too flattering. I mean, I talk to the players all the time about having an attitude about striving to be perfect, but also knowing that you will never achieve that. But the point is to strive to be perfect. The point isn't to give up because you won't be perfect. So mistakes are going to come. That's It's part of the job. It's part of life. Sometimes they're really painful, really critical mistakes, and they're very glaring to the public, and you look silly, you look bad, um, but it is balanced if you're around long enough by virtue of the fact that sometimes you get accolades you don't deserve as well. You're made to look good by your players in scenarios and situations where they just happen to make the right play, and maybe it's because of training, maybe it's something you said somewhere along the way, maybe you're just the beneficiary of good fortune. But yeah, you want to strive to be perfect, but you do understand that you know it isn't always going to work that way.
Great, very well said. Now, one more play I want to break down, and we're gonna go to the PBA here with a guy who I think if you got to coach him would have been very interesting. Chris Newsom. Do you see the screen right now? Do you see the play, coach?
Yep, yep, yep.
This
See,
is the championship winning shot. So my first
well,
instinct here is Banchero is taking the ball out, and Ciso, is this the right like defensive strategy right now? How he's trying to prevent Newsom? What do you think about that?
it's the right defensive strategy if the coach said, let's deny him and switch all screens. But there ends up not being a screen. So he kind of gets caught what looks like out of position, but really he's just denying. And he's using a very, very illegal standard of physicality. But in these situations, the referees don't want to decide the game by making a call. So that's why you see Newsom in literally a wrestling match with Simon. And in this case, Noose gets to where he wants to go on the court.
But with 3.3 seconds left, does it make sense to block this area out in the perimeter? Doesn't having the guy closer to the rim hurt you with 3.3 seconds left? Or am I off in that assumption?
Well, I think we're getting into Monday morning quarterbacking here, and when you look at it in retrospect, you're 100% right. You say, "Oh, well, you'd rather have Newsom have the ball out by half court than
Yeah.
a catch and shoot scenario." But the principle here at play, San Miguel, and I don't know, I wasn't in their huddle, but it may be we've got to deny him. And so all you see Simon doing there is doing everything he can to deny the ball. I think what's interesting is they're using pressure on the inbounder instead of
Mm.
the inbounder as a fifth denial defender because his man is not a factor, although he will be as soon as he throws it in.
So let's play it here. Now, Chris pushes off, but very, smart in a smart fashion, gets free from the defender, and immediately Trolliano here notices what's happening and he's ready to switch. So is this the right thing to do here? Leave the guy and go to the guy who might have the ball?
100%. Because just by happenstance, Newsome gets open and somebody's got to cover him. And you don't think that Cliff Hodge is out there to be taking a last second shot. He's out there for a tip in.
And
So
June Mars here too, if ever Cliff decides to roll. Go on, coach.
correct. So you got two offensive players on the weak side, but you see how Moralco reacted to the scenario. Literally everybody on the court is offensive rebounders, apart from, and I think Ginto, who's passing the ball in bounds. Everybody else is out there for rebounding. So this was a do or die play, for Moralco, and it was well chronicled after the event that this is something that Noose works on, almost daily, not just for an in-game scenario, but to use it as if there's not much time left on the shot clock and they have an inbound situation. So this is something that, as a professional, he's aware that he's going to be called on in that moment. And so he practices it. Apparently, he practices it religiously. And here you see the payoff for practice, rather than getting overly excited about, all of the intricacies of a play to get a player open. They really just relied on his athleticism and his practice ethic, and an abiding trust between the coaching staff and Noose in that situation.
And if you're the defense here, can you play it any better than the way he contested the shot without fouling?
Not really.
He's right there.
I mean, Noose is committed to the shot, so the only thing you could say is that Don could, he could leave his feet as well, and perhaps instead of walling up to contest this shot, because that doesn't give you a lot of elevation when you wall up, he could have gone with a left-handed contest, which would have taken him outside Newsome's right side of his body. Probably his left hand would have had more elevation than with his feet on the ground and just walling up. But you can't, like, in the moment, it's very difficult to take issue with what Don did there.
And in that situation, the ref's probably not going to call a foul if you just get a little physical, right? On that shot, maybe hit him in the arm a little bit. You think the refs would call that?
Well, if you're France in the Olympics and team, and you're not supposed to lose to Japan in the qualifying round, and the Japanese player contests the last second shot and doesn't come anywhere near the body, the refs are going to call it. So I don't trust the refs. You got to make the plays, and I don't say that as a criticism of referees. I say that is, sport is meant to be decided by players. So as a player, you should have the mentality that I'm not going to depend on the ref to make or not make a call. I'm going to make the right play. And if the referees happen to intervene with a great call or a bad call, you have to live with that too.
Okay, we have been joined by Coach Tab Baldwin. We only have a few more minutes with him. Coach, I have to ask, I just have to. The 4-point shot in the PBA. Few coaches have come out, stated their feelings about it. Some have said we wish it was practiced more, maybe, and used more in like a practice tune-up, maybe tune-up games, practice sessions. Some said maybe the PBA D-League use it to experiment there first before implementing it right away in the PBA with so little time for teams to get used to it. And there are the tactical approaches to it. I had Coach Charles Tew on a few weeks ago, and he said, if my team is up 2 with 4 seconds left on the clock, and now I know there's a 4-point shot, I'm fouling and sending them to the free throw line, right? Oh, sorry, if my team is up 3 and there's a 4-point line, I'm fouling because I don't want to be beaten by a 4-point shot, and now you have to go to the free throw line. From a basketball perspective, How is this going to change the way teams play, in your opinion?
Great question. I mean, I think that you opened the show up talking about spacing. So look, the calculations are really simple. When the 3-point line was introduced into college basketball in the States or into the amateur game, everybody quickly did the calculation. And in those days, back in the 70s, everybody wanted to shoot 50% from the field. That was a good shooting percentage. So you automatically said, with an extra point allowed for a 3-point shot, if you shoot 33%, that's the same as shooting 50% from two. So now if you just extend that calculation one more time, 25% from the four is the same as shooting 50% from the two. And these days, nobody's shooting 50% from the two. Teams are shooting 44, 45, 46%, and they're happy with that. So something under 25% from the four is now going to be considered a good possession.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like that personally. What you're doing is you're trying to make basketball like baseball. Trying to make us accept that if you're successful 22% of the time, or in baseball, if you're successful 30% of the time, you're a great hitter. So now you're saying if you're successful 25% of the time from the 4-point shot, you're a great shooter. But the flip side of that is that people don't come to basketball games to see people fail 75% of the time.
Correct.
You don't come to a game to see that. So, I think the premise of the 4-point shot is flawed, and it's a marketing ploy. So, the bigger question then, is it going to work? Is it going to be attractive? Is it going to create excitement? Is it going to create more highlights? Probably there's a lot of people that would say yes and a lot of people that would say no to all of that. But I think the bigger question is, why was it implemented? Is the PBA in trouble? Do they need a gimmick? Because it's a gimmick. Will coaches now have to take it into account strategically? Some will. Some will say, look, I'm not going to worry about something that's 25%, efficiency and trying to factor that into how we run our offenses. But yeah, you'll see both, and you'll see certain players and maybe certain teams try to use it and perhaps even use it effectively. But to give a qualitative, it's going to be good for the game, it's going to be bad for the game, I don't know. And I'm more interested in the motivation for having it, and I understand what it's going to do to the game. And I personally don't like that, but that doesn't mean that it isn't something that ultimately could be considered good for the game. Mine's just a personal opinion. And everybody thinks about the made 4-point shot. I think about the missed 4-point shot, and how silly that looks, to see guys 30 feet from the basket taking a shot 8 seconds, 10 seconds into a possession. It's counter to what I consider to be good basketball.
Could it lead to more leak out opportunities for the defense as well? Because you're farther from the ring now, and if you miss that shot, longer rebound, and the guy contesting the 4-point shooter, his distance to get to his side of the court is shorter than what it used to be, right?
I don't think so, because the defender will be somewhere in the vicinity. And by the defender, I mean the shooter.
Yeah.
So he's way back as well. I don't think, maybe it will, but I tell you what it will do. It's going to see, I think, the continued evolution of the stretch 4 and potentially the stretch 5. Not just because it's going to take bigger men further from the basket, but physiologically, a lot of big men are good shooters now, but they're much stronger. They have increased range, and they're just going to have to spend a little bit more time repping 4-point shots to become one of those quote unquote competent 4-point shooters. I don't think that's going to make their percentage climb into the 30s and into the 40s. So for me, the aesthetic is still very important. But I do think that you're going to see trail threes from stretch fours, from trailing big men, perhaps a bit more. And that means these shots are going to be taken even earlier in the shot clock. So good luck to the PBA. I mean, uh, it's kind of unusual to make such a big change without experimenting in, say, the D League or something like that. Um, but anything that's good for the game of basketball, it doesn't really matter what my opinion is. If ultimately it's good for the game, then good for them. Um, but I would like to see, personally, I would like to see anything that is a significant rules change that's going to impact the way the game is played. I would like to see that canvassed by the coaches. I really believe the coaches are the caretakers of the sport, and the players should be playing the sport. And we coaches are responsible for giving them the greatest playing experience that they can possibly have. And that includes being a significant influence on the rules of how the game is played.
Great thoughts, Coach. Now I'm gonna end with this question because you have been in the UAAP for, it's crazy to think, but almost 1 decade now. Not quite there yet, but almost 1 decade. Overall, where the UAAP is in terms of overall competition, in terms of the way teams are recruiting now, in terms of the way players are transferring and going to other schools quicker than how it used to be, in terms of the media aspect of it, how it's become covered so much now, social media, traditional media, highlights media, in terms of the coaches in the league, in terms of the players in the league, in terms of the decision making. How do you value or how do you see where the UAAP is right now? And do you like where the UAAP as a league, everything I said considered, is going?
UAAP is a great league. Um, and right now, I think teams are getting better and better and more competitive. Um, there are concerns around player movement, and I'm not just talking transfers. I'm not just talking about recruiting. I'm talking about players leaving early and going to play in the pros. But that isn't something that, as a coach, I worry about it, but it isn't something I have any fix for. I think the people that love the UAAP, that care for the UAAP, um, and that should be the university presidents. Um, I think they've got to sit down and have some discussions and talk about the welfare of the game, the welfare of the student athlete system, um, and we have to adapt and live with the decisions that they make, and because these people are highly respected, successful people, we should have trust in what they decide. But I really believe that they do need to sit down and talk about it. Um, you're very aware, I'm sure, of the NIL in the U.S. You know that the NCAA is no longer the same animal that it was 5 years ago. Certainly not. You know.
20 years ago, yeah.
Um, and I was talking with a good friend that's the head coach at Texas Christian the other day, and he said, "Coach, you don't recognize it anymore." He said, "It's free agency now, literally free agency. A player plays for you 1 year. If they have a good year, they're going in the portal and they're putting themselves out there for the highest bidder." So it's a different animal, and the UAAP isn't there yet, but what you see going on is a move in that direction. So people have to sit back and say, "Is this what we want?" And if it is what we want, then okay, let's get on board and have free agency. Um, if it's not what we want, then it's not going to be an easy fix. But if it's not what they want, they shouldn't just talk about fixing it. They should take measures to fix it. As a
What
coach,
was, sorry, go for it, Coach, go for it.
I'm just going to say, as a coach, we just adapt to whatever the landscape is, and you can have your personal opinions and views, but they're just that. And you just got to get on and do the job and win games for your school and help your players develop into pros.
What was your reaction to the reported news about how the UAAP was considering where if a player transfers from a UAAP school to another, they sit out for 1 year but 2 seasons would be taken from their eligibility?
Um, I think from a tactical standpoint, in terms of addressing the transfers and things like that, it's fairly toothless because um, most of the players that are going to be in this scenario are high value players. That's why there's so much, you know, at stake with these transfers. That's why UAAP would, um, make what they probably believe is a fairly drastic step. You know, costing a player 2 years of eligibility. So effectively, if you don't transfer after your freshman year,
You're
yeah, you don't have much opportunity left, and everybody knows that. But the reality is, a lot of these same players that you're talking about and trying to maybe discourage them from transferring, they're probably going to go pro after 2 years or 3 years anyway. That's the trend. So if you don't, if you don't take some measures on that side of things, then are you really creating disincentives for a player to leave after his freshman year, wait 1 year, which they had to do anyway, and then play, and then perhaps go pro after that 1 year or one more year, but certainly, you know, not going to play out 3 more years if they're as good as they perhaps.
yeah.
It's it's up in the air. It's important, I think, if you see it's a problem, and the UAAP must see that it's a problem. It's important to do something and see if it works. So I applaud that. I'm just a little skeptical about, will it really be a disincentive to the players? Um, but we'll see. We'll see.
Fantastic. Well, that's our time with Coach Stab Baldwin, everybody. Coach, this was incredible. Just the basketball from the analytics side to it, the film viewing, and even the league discussion that we just had. We've been talking about doing this for a while now, and I'm so happy we finally got to do it. Even if, like you said, you woke up today with a bit of a hoarse voice, we didn't notice it at all, by the way. You sounded very normal. But really, Coach, thank you for your time and thank you for the knowledge that you've imparted in everyone. And I hope we get to do this again in the future.
My pleasure, Naveen. It's a lot of fun just to talk basketball and, kind of get away from a lot of the off-court issues that, that can plague our sport all over the world. I prefer, just to be a basketball guy and stay away from all the other stuff. Sometimes we have to deal with it, but appreciate you. Appreciate all your listeners. Take care. God bless to everybody. And I hope everybody has a wonderful day and a great week ahead. God bless you all.
Thank you, Coach. I'll be seeing you at the UAP. We're starting earlier than usual this year, but I can't wait. To me, it's the best league in the country, and I'm excited to see how you and your team go through this transition phase right now. And I think you guys will be very competitive. So thank you again for your time, Coach.
Thanks, Naveen.
God bless you, Coach.
Thank you. Appreciate being here.
Okay, everybody, thank you so much. I don't need to explain and say how amazing that was. Thank you, of course, to Coach Tab Baldwin for coming and imparting some basketball wisdom to all of us. I feel like this was refreshing content, the kind of basketball discussion we needed to enhance our love for the game and what we feel about the way Philippine basketball is right now. And of course, this wouldn't have been a success without all of you guys. Sorry if I'm fixing my hair. But this wouldn't have been a success without all of you guys really coming on and sharing your thoughts in the comment section and asking your questions. I'm sorry if I didn't get to ask all the questions that all of you submitted, but there was just so much to discuss. But we will do a part two with Coach Tab, and we will do this as a series with other coaches. There are other coaches and players I would like to have come on to discuss this kind of basketball breakdown, analytics, and X's and O's. We're still gonna do the usual interview stuff we do on the podcast and on playback, but we're also gonna start implementing some basketball fundamentals and terminologies. But again, thank you to everybody. I'm not sure if I'm going to do Harm's We, but good suggestion. Thanks, of course, to our regulars, to Dens, to Nicole, to Tonyo, to Nico, to Paolo, to Simon, to Lance, to Nicole, of course, my sister, Celtics Manila even joined us. And to those I'm missing right now, I'm sorry about that. And of course, thank you again to Coach Tab Baldwin, to the visitors of the platform. Hope you guys can subscribe to the channel. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Have a great Sunday. And we'll see you all very soon.